take action. Now's the time to do more and be more.
All right, we're ready to go. Welcome to Tango One Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Smith, retired SWAT team leader, the owner of the garage gym, Tango One Solutions. And my mission every week is to challenge you to do more and be more. And I think this week we have a guest who can just do just that for you. My guest is Michael Easter, a friend for a very long time. We'll get into that a little bit. He was an editor at Men's Health, a columnist for the Outside Magazine, and is a prof at UNLV. But most importantly, recently, not most importantly, but big accomplishment recently, is the author of the new book, The Comfort Crisis: Embrace Discomfort to Reclaim Your Wild, Happy, Healthy Self, which is available now on all kinds of platforms. And I am literally like at the last chapter, man. And I'm not even like, I picked this up. Obviously, you're a friend. I don't know if I wasn't expecting, as I'm just like loving it. Like, I cannot believe how great this book has been, man. Your feedback must be great too. I just see your face everywhere.
Awesome, dude. That's great to hear. So I have a question. Are you doing hard copy or are you doing audio?
I've been doing audio, and I'll tell you why. I am going to do the hard copy next, though, and I'm actually ordering some for my buddies because we've been doing the Masogis without even knowing the word for it.
That's awesome.
Forever, me and this group of guys, and I think like it's kind of been missing in my life the last like 5-6 years is that once I had my kids, we kind of let those trips fall behind. And I think I need it back. So yeah, I've been doing 75 hard, so that the two workouts a day. So I listen to your voice every day for 45 minutes while I walk. So I'm happy it's a long book too.
Well, I'm sorry you have to hear my obnoxious voice in your ear for at least 8 hours. I think the book's 8 hours in audio, but I'm glad you're liking it.
Yeah. So are you pushing the not that you're pushing, but because of the whole comfort crisis, are you trying to encourage people to read the novel? Is that why?
No, I just wondered. It's interesting because most books generally sell more in physical, like paper copies, but my book, for whatever reason, it sold a lot more in audio. I think part of it is going on podcasts, and I think part of it too, to your point, it tends to appeal to people who are just have too much energy, want to train, want to do interesting things, and are not going to sit down in a chair for an hour and read a book. Audio allows them to do 75 hard and listen to the book at the same time. So
yeah,
it's been cool.
It's interesting you say that too, because I'm like, man, I'm outside, I'm walking, and like we don't have we're pretty flat where we live, but there's some we call them green trails, almost like you called them in your book, like the level 1 of getting out into nature, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I'm out here in nature, I'm loving it, and I'm listening to what you're saying. Then I'm like, I shouldn't have my headphones in, I shouldn't be connected to the world. But I'm like, it's like that kind of balance where I kind of feel guilty, but I feel great at the same time.
Right on, man. That's awesome. I like it.
So going into that, I was actually telling my wife about that little stat you said, what it was 20, if you're out just 20 minutes 3 times a week out in nature.
Yeah.
It drops your cortisol. Now I'm feeling that, and I'm out there almost every day, but I'm not out there very long, and I'm not even really in nature.
It's and that's to your point, you can get that from a city park, which is amazing. So that's research that's been sort of proven time and time again. 20 minutes seems to be the magic number, and it is in I call it city nature. That's Central Park, something like that. That's not super wild. And yeah, it drops your cortisol, increases focus too, tends to increase productivity as well. So there's, one of the women I talked to in the book, who's this nature researcher who does all kinds of work on what happens to the brain in nature. She talks about how, she'll give a talk and people will come up to her after and be like, look, this is just one more thing on this list of stuff that scientists say I have to do for my health, And she frames it like this. She's like, well, here's the deal. If you were to just try and power through 8 hours of work at home, you're going to get burned out eventually. So you might, let's say, create 20 widgets, right? But if you take 20 minutes and go outside, it's going to rejuvenate you. It's going to drop your stress. It's going to increase your focus. It also tends to increase creativity as well. So you might actually be able to come back to your office or your normal life, whatever you're doing. And now you can create 21, 22 widgets And then the other thing is they might be more creatively designed or better made, whatever. So it really is like an investment in yourself. And it's unbelievably simple, to your point. It's just like, yeah, go outside for a while. Don't overthink it.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of seeing two things. Like, so this is for sure. I'm like 55 days without a drink, without like 55 days sober. And I know you are somebody who has quit. Like you're still running with that, right? The sobriety thing as you sip on a coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So,
coffee.
but I'm curious. Like, so now I'm out. I'm a nature guy, but now I'm out in it more because I'm actually doing this challenge and getting away from the kids, getting away from the family, the business, the computer. But I'm also sober, and not that I was going nature hikes drunk before, but like I'm finding that like, and I don't know if it's my focus on the clarity of like from just being out more, or if it's the sobriety at the same time. So I'm wondering if you found the same thing. I'm just like, I feel like I'm out in that nature, and I'm like, I found myself, maybe I'm an old man too. I'm like, oh my God, look how nice those flowers are. Like, and I've like been walking the same trails over and over, and I'm just noticing different things and like having a greater appreciation. Did you find that with the sobriety? You think that's more with the nature walks? Like, what do you think is?
Oh yeah, dude. I think it's like, I don't know about you, but I mean, for me, it was like get sober or early grave. And so for me, it was kind of like, all right, I've started to realize like, oh, I'm probably not going to die early like I was going to. And then you start to appreciate life, and you start to see, like, for me, I started to see all these things that I'd kind of been missing that were always there, but I just wasn't there enough to pay attention to them and notice them. So I would go on these long walks with my dog in the morning in Pennsylvania, like along this river. And like literally sometimes, and this is so embarrassing, my wife still gives me shit about it. I would see like a tree and like, fog coming off the river, and I would just start crying like a baby. I'm just like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. But I do think that nature really speaks to humans because we evolved in nature, right? So there's all these like patterns you see in nature, and it sort of inserts you into the life cycle and kind of gets you out of your comfort zone. Now, people spend like 95% of their time indoors. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's that, like, if given a choice, the human brain is going to default to whatever's easier, whatever's more comfortable, and whatever it can predict. Being inside checks all those boxes, right? Outside is more unpredictable. It's less comfortable because there's temperature fluctuations. It could rain, it could whatever. And you're usually up and doing something in nature. So that's like, we are incentivized to stay indoors in our comfort zones, but that doesn't actually serve us anymore, right? So that's kind of one of the overarching theses of this book, is that we have this internalized drive to always do the next easiest, next most comfortable, next most predictable thing. Because in the past, when we were living outside, when we were working for our food, when the world was rough and tumble, that used to keep us alive, right? Kept us out of danger, kept us safe, got us food, helped us overeat, pack on fat when we couldn't find food. But now we live in these worlds that are super comfortable in every way and predictable and safe and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that backfires.
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, the sobriety, like, that came on two things. It was one, like from the mental health stuff, and with my things in policing, booze has always been a trigger. And like, I'm not even so much the night of, almost like the days following, the fogs following, where I've had the bigger lows. But then I was at a cottage this summer, and I'm like standing on a cliff and to cliff jump. And my little boys are in the truck or in the boat watching me from below. And I was one who didn't really like heights in the past, but got over them during my life in SWAT, jumping off of buildings and things. And found that, I'm 5 years removed from that. I've kind of like taken a step back as a father, as a business owner, being a little bit too busy. And it's okay to be scared at the top of that cliff, but I wouldn't want to jump. Like, I was up there for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, I kind of like, this is before I even started the book. I kind of felt like, man, I've just let myself get too comfortable with things. So I'm like, what's something I've never done? I've never tried to kick the bottle. So that's where the 55 or the 75 hard kind of started.
Oh, that's cool.
And now I'm like, now I'm 55 days, and my thing is like, I didn't set out to stay sober for life, but now I'm considering it's a weird decision I guess I got to make in about 20 days. There's no way I'm not finishing these 20 days, but past that, I wonder how long I'm going to go, or if I should. I'm just liking things way better.
Yeah, well, I mean, alcohol is a depressant, right? So it does a lot to your brain chemistry that kind of like keeps you down. And then when you get out of that, things start to normalize and kind of rebound back to normalcy. So, I mean, for me, it was like I definitely experienced the like, oh my God, like life is amazing thing. Like a lot of highs immediately after, probably like the year or two after. And then things start to kind of like come back to normal. But still, I mean, my life is a lot better in every way. But it also, I mean, it sounds like I probably drank a little differently than you did too. So
Well, I actually don't know about that. That was pretty hard into the ball when I do it. And then what's the point? I wonder. Like I just kind of started having fun. Like now when I'm like, I had actually my birthday party a couple weeks ago, and all the guys that I usually like booze hard with were here for football Sunday, and they all did their thing, but I didn't drink, and I actually had a blast. And I
yeah,
feel like that was like the first time I've really had fun without, being I have lots of fun with my friends without drinking, but it's usually not when they are drinking, I am drinking. This is the first time
right.
I've been at a drinking thing where I had fun.
Totally. Well, it's like when I was getting sober, I was like all freaked out about like, what do you do if you're at a party and someone asks you if you want to drink? Like, how do you even have fun at a party? And like
Yeah.
this dude I know who was also sober, I was like, so what do I do if someone asks me if I want to drink? He's like, do you want to drink? He's like, well, how about you just say no thanks? It's like it's so damn simple, but like we tend to overcomplicate everything, especially if you've kind of leaned into something for a while. It can seem like, oh well, this is going to be I'm going to be in a totally new headspace, this is going to be terrifying, but it's always fine. So I don't know.
Yeah, we do tend to overthink everything, don't we?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
there's one thing I really want to get into that to make sure that we don't miss it is the Masogis. So like, first of all, am I even saying that right? Masogi.
Yes, you are. You're actually one of the few who got it right off the bat. Nice job.
I practiced it like 10 times before.
Yeah,
So
nice job.
this is something that really interests me. So maybe, I don't know, if not everybody's read the book. So maybe if you don't mind, like kind of like explaining it a little bit.
Yes. So in the book, I basically, I spent a month up in the Arctic, and it was kind of like this, journey that was going to be super challenging for me. I wasn't sure if I could do the whole month, whatever. And part of the reason I did this is because I met this dude whose name is Marcus Elliott, and he's a really interesting dude. You kind of have to know that he's a little bit out there. One of the first things is that he's out there, right? He used to go to Burning Man, like back in the day when it was just like this little weird thing out in the desert. He got through college by counting cards, but he's also really freaking smart. Like he's got an MD from Harvard, and he decides he doesn't want to be a doctor. He's going to try and get into sports science. And he ended up working with a bunch of teams. He helped some football teams win Super Bowls. And then he went out and did his own thing, his own company. And now they have contracts with the NBA and all these different leagues. And he's basically just applying like AI and numbers and data to performance. So he does a lot of stuff where he'll put these little reflective things all over players and watch their movement. And then he'll, it goes through sort of some algorithm and compares it with everyone else's movement and injury history. And then he can be like, look, your knee does this, and that gives you a 60% chance of getting injured in a game over the next season, whatever it is, right? So I told you all that to basically tell you that although he's this like super numbers, data, and figure driven guy, he also realizes that what really improves human potential, whether it be, one of the MVPs of the NBA or some schmuck like me, is it can't always be measured, right? So to get to those sort of unmeasurables, like gear that some people just freaking have that allows them to sort of power through and do anything, he does this thing that he calls Masogi. And there are only two rules to this. And rule number one is that it has to be really, really hard, which he defines by saying you should have a 50-50 shot of finishing it. And that's like true 50% shot. So if you did this thing 100 times, you should fail 50 of them, right? And then the other rule is that you can't die. And so basically the idea is that like he's going to pick him and some friends are going to pick some random task in nature, some physical thing. And then they're going to go out and see if they can do it. And it has to be something they're not really sure if they can accomplish. But what happens is that, I mean, first of all, when people choose to do some physical challenge, we usually train for it a ton. And so it's not, am I going to be able to finish this? Like take a marathon. People don't go into marathons going, I don't know if I can finish the marathon. It usually what happens is, I don't know if I can finish the marathon in 4 hours or 3 hours.
Right.
So you know you're going to finish, right? But you just aren't sure if you're going to finish in some arbitrary time standard. So by doing something that is truly challenging, people tend to get to a point where they're truly not sure if they're going to be able to finish. You know, you hit a point where you're like, I'm pretty sure I'm at my edge. I'm going to quit. I think I have to quit at this point. But if you keep on going, then you can get to a point where you can look back and say, oh, well, back there, I thought that was my complete limit. Like I'm done. I was at my edge. But now I'm past that. So if I'm selling myself short there, like where else in life am I selling myself short? So what it really is it's like a psychological, emotional, almost even spiritual challenge that's masquerading as this physical thing. So, and they've done things like, they one time did, they found an 85-pound boulder and they walked it 5 miles underneath the Santa Barbara Channel. So one dude would dive down, pick it up, walk it, like 10, 20 yards. Then the next dude would go. And after like 5 or 6 hours, the rock was at point B. They've done things like, they didn't really know how to stand up paddleboard that well, but they're like, all right, we're going to go get these paddleboards. We're going to figure it out. And we're going to do this crazy distance, see if we can do it. You know what I mean? So it's the other thing that alludes at is it's not, they're untraditional. And the reason for that is because people often do things to compare themselves to others, right? So like, let's say I'm going to do an ultra marathon because my neighbor did it in this time and I'm going to try and beat him, but if you just make up some weird thing, you really can't compare yourself to anyone. And you have no standard of like, how fast should I be doing this? It's just like, you just want to finish, So that's kind of what the idea is. And now I want to hear, you alluded to the fact that you kind of had been doing something similar to this. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I took a trip into Vegas and we did, I think I did 9 backcountry hikes, like basically 2-3 day hikes in July through like arches, through the Canyonlands, through everything over the course of 21 days. I don't know if that was ever put myself in a position where I didn't know if I was going to finish, but for sure, one of the ones I didn't know I was going to finish was, you talked about being in South and Central America. I flew down to Costa Rica, did a trip, kind of reminded me of the Instagram stories you were sharing lately with Europe, cars and buses and into the middle of nowhere, basically to the edge of the Kosovo is at the very end of Costa Rica where it meets Panama, and hiked for 4 days into the rainforest there with no guide. I was not sure I was coming out of. And the Everglades is another one. I paddled the Everglades. The Everglades was a serious, but just a bunch of backcountry hiking trips into the middle of nowhere. We started and you talk about bulldozer parents or snowplow parents and helicopter parents. And I want to sit down with my parents and talk to them about this. They let me do a trip in Northern Ontario. We were 17 years old. We drove 24 hours, me and 2 buddies, and then ended up paddling for 7 days through and saw no people in the middle of nowhere. And this is before cell phones. Like we had a quarter taped on the map so we could call for the ride when we got to the, to the point B. I wonder at what point, I don't think I'd ever let my kids do that. How would that be the difference there? And is there a, I guess before we kind of move up in Muskogee is there a time frame that kind of qualifies for it? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the way that the Marcus dude I explained approaches it is it could just be a one-day thing. I don't think it has to be, but I think he talks about that because a lot of people use I don't have enough time as an excuse, so he wants it to be as simple as possible. But I do think if you have the time, there's no saying you couldn't go do something like that's 7 days, or like I did, that's 30 days. But again, I think the key is rule number 2, don't die,
Don't die.
So, I mean, and that's the beauty of modern life is nowadays you can have something like a GPS thing. You can have a GPS map. Our gear is really good. I mean, it's definitely not something that you should approach haphazardly. And And you should think about, okay, if I do fail, how am I going to get out of this? Like that really needs to be addressed. But I think that trying things like whatever it might be, whether it be a day or you're like, I'm going to do a 2-day hike or, whatever, is super rewarding for people. Like you probably learned a lot about yourself, also about your friends, made some friends for life on that trip, like it was probably something like you've probably told your kids about it, right?
Yeah.
Like it was probably awesome.
For sure. And the part in your book that hit home, it was like, it's some of the little small things that you wrote about that were really like had me smiling. And I told you I'm ordering these books. I'm actually sending it to those two guys because
nice.
I'm planning something. Like I think I'm going to go try the Adventures in the Cold, maybe something up north here since I can't really travel. But anyways, I want to get that same fire that you kind of lit in me while I was out on my walks. Was you said sometimes you were laying on the hill with I guess it'd be Don and who was the other guy on there?
William.
Yeah, so Don and William.
Yeah.
You're laying on the hill and you're like, sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't, sometimes like, it was like, that's what I found when we would do those backcountry trips. You'd be some days laying there for like 8 hours. We're hauled up. We can't really paddle across a big open lake. And it was like, and you had nothing left to read. You're reading the insides of your mattresses and your tent labels.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that it really like those little small nuances about being by yourself that really hit home for me.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we had, we were out there for a long time and it's just like, eventually you run out of things to talk about in a given moment. And that's totally okay, because like, when you're out there doing hard things with people, I think it connects people a lot more than just like your average, oh yeah, let's go get a sandwich together,
Right.
You're just put in a position, like you're both put in positions where you're going to see how a person like really reacts under stress. And that's where you really get to know them. Like, do they flip out and swear and freak out? Or are they just like, oh, this is kind of funny, So I think you do kind of realize who your friends are going to be for life and things like that. And yeah, it can definitely be boring as well when you get holed up.
So if we circle back a little bit to what I said about my parents and then like maybe your take on this, because you like really researched and talked to a lot of like very intelligent people about this kind of stuff, is like, how do I so I have two little boys, 8 and 6. And at one point, I hope that they're going to want to do something like I did when I was 17, 18, right to 5 years ago. How am I going to like get my parents' mindset? What's the difference between me and my parents, I guess? Because I always think my parents are still like tight and rigid, but man, like now looking back at the decisions they allowed me to do, like maybe they aren't, maybe they had something on me that I need to get from them.
Yeah. Well, I think, culturally, the bar is always shifting of what's considered normal, right? So that may not have been, that's what your parents allowed you to do was only seemingly crazy when looked at through the lens of 2021,
Right. Yeah.
But if you looked at it from 1821, well, that was just a normal week, like, oh yeah, you have to travel into town or whatever it is.
Yeah. You go get groceries.
yeah, exactly. So I think it kind of just depends on what lens we're looking at it through. But I think for kids for today, it's funny because one of my best friends, really successful dude, he started a hedge fund company and his kids are going to be comfortable. Let's just say that it could be. And he's like, dude, I read your book and like, I don't want my kids to be super soft and like entitled and blah, 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 blah. He's just freaking out. He's like, so should I just like move us into like a shitty part of town and like maybe send them to a really rough high school? Like, no, no, like the point of you working is not so you can live in somewhere like sketchy. But it's like, how do we introduce, tigers back into our life, more or less? Like, what can you do for your kids that will give them moments where they are forced to dig deep and are thrown out of their comfort zone, and also realize just how good they have it in the grand scheme of time and space. So I think for that, like, even something like Outward Bound or something like that, where like you put them in a program and for a couple of weeks, they have to go out with some other kids and, do stuff outdoors for like 2 weeks or 1 week. Even something like Boy Scouts where they go out and go camping and that kind of stuff. Like just get people, I think, the key themes are that they have to be doing difficult things. Difficult things outside seem to be better than difficult things indoors, which isn't to say that difficult stuff indoors is useless. It just means that I think outside has some extra elements that are beneficial, and consistency too. So it's like, once a year, twice a year, have them do stuff, because what happens, just like I talked about with, how you feel like you're on some cloud after sobriety, but then you kind of eventually level out. Well, I think that happens with most things in life. Once you get a really big, cool lesson from something, you're like riding this high. And then over time, if you don't do something like that again, you kind of normalize. So that's how I would approach it.
And for you, when you were growing up, like, so you and I met at Jim Jones on a rower. Speaking of things we didn't think we were going to finish, 7 minutes that I didn't know I was going to finish.
Yeah.
But you're writing for Men's Health at that point, like, and is that what kind of triggered you to be able to go and do cool things, or wanting to do more cool things like this? Or was that already something that you were doing? Like, were you living the comfortable life, I guess is what I'm saying, or before you started kind of like going this way? That's the only part I've known you, is when you've been doing all these cool little trips and getting sent out. So was that always part of your life, I guess? A long-winded question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it was kind of, there was always an interest in it. And then my job just put me in increasing, like, just different situations that I think pushed that. But I think what I've sort of learned, and one thing that I talk about in this book, is that a lot of times when I like kind of describe the book in like 2 words, people are like, oh, it's like, exercise really hard in the gym or something. It's like, no, because I mean, that's part of it. But, we humans want to be comfortable and avoid discomfort in a lot of ways. We don't want to be bored. We don't want to ever be hungry. We don't want to be in silence. We don't want to go outdoors. Like, there's all these things that we used to face as a part of our, past lifestyles that we don't anymore. So I think that sort of over time, like, I've been introduced to like the next level of things, and it's sort of made me think about, how do we reintroduce these forms of discomfort that are important back into our life in a variety of ways? So like, yeah, going hard at Jim Jones is like amazing. But it's just one of the ways, So I think a lot of times, especially people in the training community, it's like for example, I know a dude who like smokes ultra marathons. You have to be kind of a psychopath for that. The dude could not sit in silence for like 30 seconds. Right. So like, okay, we've got an imbalance there. Like, let's talk about what's going on inside your head. Like, what the hell are you running away from? Right. So I think that trying to peel back more layers than just the physical through a variety of mechanisms is important.
Man. Yeah, I gotta definitely agree with you there. And maybe that guy, like one of those like monk type challenges, they have those camps right now you go to for like 7 days with no talking.
Yeah, like a meditation retreat type thing. Yeah, no talking. A lot of times in those, your food is relatively minimal. And the reason they do that is it tends to just like slow down your metabolism over time. Once you eat a lot less, like you kind of get a drop. So your body goes into preservation mode or whatever. And it just sort of like makes it easier for you to center in. So even the fact that you're going to be hungry there too is another element,
Yeah, hunger. Hunger is the one thing I have a real hard time with.
Yeah,
I suck with hunger. So on this trip, this Don Vincent guy seems like an absolute savage, man. The way you're describing when you guys are walking through the mountains, like packing up that meat.
Oh yeah.
How, like, there had to be times where you just felt so like, did you feel like dependent, like your life was dependent on like these other guys? Like, I know you've got some experience out there, but like,
yeah,
in the Arctic, like, I mean, I actually have a crazy story with a grizzly that I came face to face with before. And wow. How terrifying and how small you are in that world, and nothing compared to the Arctic. Like, how crazy, it just must be surreal being out there.
Yeah, it's totally wild. Like, the land's just like so big. And to your point, you just feel like unbelievably small. I mean, you're so remote, so far from everything. And yeah, I mean, let's say I wouldn't have gone alone for 30 days.
Yeah, like I feel like I'd be like against his back every time he turned around, he'd bump into me.
Yeah, and he's an interesting dude because he spent so much time up there that like just nothing really rattles him, which I think is kind of like a metaphor for getting better at anything. You just got to kind of put the time in. Yeah, like just everything for he's like no fear of grizzlies because he's like, dude, there's like 3 of us. They're not gonna mess with us. We're fine. Even in like crazy, crazy weather, he'd just kind of be like, yeah, well, we'll make it back. Don't worry. Just totally chill. And I'm like, dude, this is crazy. We like this is unsafe right now. He's like, no, we'll be fine. And he would always be right, So yeah, he's a good dude.
Wow. What was your craziest, like, of all these things, what do you think that was the number, like the time where you thought maybe this is it for me? And any trip, really, I guess. You've done so many of these cool things now.
Yeah, I would say probably, well, like at least for the book, there was definitely, I mean, we had one, which I write about it in the book. We had one night where we almost lost our shelter to like these hurricane force winds, and it was gnarly, dude, like super sketchy. And then we also had one day where it was -20 most of the day, and we're like walking. I mean, we'd had to like walk across a river in the morning, so like boots are frozen the entire day. And I think that day was just interesting because we'd hike so far, and then we'd hike on the way back, and just totally beat because it's super hard to walk on the tundra. It's like kind of swampy, soft, so like every step is tough. But I just remember having a realization at that point. It was like, oh, like you have to keep going, or else you're literally going to die out here, because like a plane can't land anywhere. We're like in the middle of this like frozen swamp. Plane can't land. If you stop going, the sun's going to go down. It's going to get really, really cold. It was like, there's literally no way out of this except to keep putting one foot in front of the other, which that's a pretty crazy realization, like that's not something that most people have to face today, which is amazing. That's why the world is awesome today, terms of other trips, I'm trying to I've had some trips where there's like been sketchy people, with like guns and stuff, but obviously I'm still here, so we made it out. I would imagine that you too have like you've probably have interesting takes, because you mentioned the grizzly thing, but like you're also dealing with metaphorical human grizzlies in your SWAT team days.
Yeah, I used to. And I always say, like, yeah, people say, yeah, you don't want to, you're traveling through South America. That's a good example. I traveled, my wife and I, our last big trip was Brazil. We drove through the countryside. It was we went for a UFC fight and then drove down the countryside to Rio.
Oh, that's cool.
Took our time getting there, just stopped wherever. And people were just think you're so crazy to do these trips. And I'm like, hey, like Detroit, you can see Detroit from my window right now. If you could see with this background, like, Detroit's pretty dangerous too. Chicago's pretty dangerous too. Like, Vegas, these are dangerous places. And the people, they view some of these countries that you've traveled to, that I've traveled to, as terrifying. But the people are just as nice, and as long as you don't put yourself in a bad situation and be smart about it.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like here, there's certain places that are more dangerous than others. So just don't go to the super dangerous places, and you're probably going to be fine. And also don't be an idiot. Like, a lot of people are just completely unaware of what's happening around them. So they get taken advantage of.
Yeah, situational awareness. I think that's one of the things, like you talk about comfort. I think situational awareness has gone with the comfort too, where people don't realize where they are and, what might happen or what they could do to avoid. Like, situational awareness leads to situational avoidance. And if you could, get yourself out of a situation without being in one, like that's my keys to traveling and stuff. But yeah, as far as like dealing with the bad humans in the world, it's funny because I know, like you say, the more you do that, the more comfortable you are with it. And it doesn't faze me anymore, even to this day. But like, I had a bat in my house a couple of weeks ago, and I was running around like a scared little grade school girl, like screaming, trying to catch his bat. So it's weird.
That's
how
awesome.
It's things that take you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I will say the Arctic definitely made me less. I just like animals. I'm just like, I don't care anymore. I'm just like, I'm fine with animals. We had a mouse in our house, and it was just like, oh, just pick it up and throw it outside. Whereas before I would have been like, oh my God, what do I do? So
I thought maybe throw it on a stick and grill it up.
Yeah.
Hey, so good timing. Speaking of uncomfortable, yesterday was one time this gets out probably in a week or so, but yesterday was the day that the world shut down Facebook and Instagram. And
oh yeah,
did that happen at, like, where you were too? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like a
everywhere,
worldwide outage, which is crazy, especially for WhatsApp. I mean, like that's how people communicate in so many different countries. That's all they use.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It was wild. It was just a wild day. And I found myself like, you talk about the crack in your book with the cell phones. I fucking kept checking, like, when's this going to come up? Like, I didn't even have anything really to do on there. So some of those cell phone things, you've got me thinking about this too. Like, so maybe what was that? You proposed it to your classroom, right? Of how many hours? So, go for that.
The first, so I got a really big class at UNLV that's like an intro class, intro to media. So it's usually 100, 150 students. And on the first day, you know, I give this big lecture about how media has changed our lifestyle so much, because the average person went from essentially 0 minutes of digital media in their lives, not even 100 years ago, to we're about 12 hours a day now, the average person. But I always ask the students in particular, because for them, cell phones is really, you know, the trigger. Like, who thinks they have the highest screen time in the class right now? And, you know, and then I'll like start. I'm like, all right, put your hand up if you have more than 6 hours. Keep your hand up if you have more than 7, more than 8, you know, and I've had as high as 8 hours, but this semester I had a kid who says he had 16 hours average a week. I'm like, how is that possible? He's like, dude, I don't sleep and I just watch TikTok all the time. I'm like, oh my God, that's insane. I feel like I need to give the kid an intervention or something.
I think so. I mean, it kind of reminded me of like our Jim Jones days with Bobby Maximus, and like, you know, if you just rode 1,000 extra meters a day, you know, how that adds, and that's in a favorable way, how it adds up to, you know, whatever, how many kilometers a year and how many kilometers over 10 years. Well, you took those cell phone numbers and then you average them out. And I was like looking at mine and 3 hours a day. And I'm like, man, now we're talking 21 hours a week. Like now we're talking the more you 3 hours a day sounds shitty, but it's like, you kind of like view that as a small, but that's an average. Now you put that over a year, 10 years, that's a lot of wasted time.
Yeah, dude, it totally is. Yeah. And I love Bobby Maximus's time audit, where people are like, yeah, I don't have enough time to work out. And he's like, runs the 24 hours or however he does it with hours in a week. And it's just like, oh yeah, I actually do have enough time to work out. You know, we're not aware of how we spend our time. Like so much of it goes to just kind of nonsense. The next easiest thing our brain can find to distract itself, more or less.
Yeah. I wish there was a way to like get your productivity actual average. Because, you know, sometimes I'm actually on there doing work, but I also know that my work productivity goes way down because I end up siphoning over to something else and getting lost in Instagram. I go in there to get one person, like, for example, you go in there to communicate with you for business purpose, you know, let's get you on the podcast, get you set up. And then I forget why I'm even on there and I end up scrolling through it mindlessly for 2 or 3 minutes, 8 minutes. And then that, you know, so I'm one on there for work justifiably in my own head, and then end up there for 10 minutes. It's just such a you know, wasteful. And you said, so what was it, 2007 when the iPhone came out?
Yeah, 2007.
Oof. And then that's where things just started to
yeah. So I think what's like, cell phones are just interesting because they're always on us. They have these algorithms that are, you know, written essentially for us to deliver us stuff that they know we will react to, more or less, on these apps. But when you look at a lot of the numbers, the average person still watches more TV than they do spend time on their cell phone. That's the average person. So like in the book, I talk about, you know, it's not, the message shouldn't just be less cell phone only. Like, yes, that's important, but we need to start thinking about it as more boredom, because what happens is when people say, okay, I'm going to get my screen time down on my iPhone, well, then they have this extra hour in their day and they're just like, well, what do I do now? And they watch more Netflix. And it's like, your brain doesn't know the difference between those two, right? It's all a screen. So like, I think that people need to find ways to let their mind wander. Go outside and take a walk and don't bring any tech. Your brain really needs these times, because anytime you're staring at a screen, your brain is working. It's like a workout. Anytime you're focused on the outside world. And so if you don't have time where you go inward and kind of mind wander, that's like your rest period. That's like your restful state that like restores your ability to work and think, just like lowers your stress levels. If you don't have that, like there's a reason why so many people are so burnt out today, because we go from computer screen to phone screen and back and forth all day. And then we go watch a Netflix screen, and it's just like all kinds of work and stimulation. Like you need time inward to think and process all that, So that's why I say, like, find some time to get bored, do something boring, just sit, let your mind go where it needs to go, take a walk. Don't bring your, phone and look at it 50 times on the walk, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I've been working on, is like actually like leaving my phone behind. Yeah. So when we go outside, my boys and I, when we get off this podcast, it's our outside time. They're homeschooled right now, so we're gonna I've been leaving my phone inside, and I do feel a difference. Like you feel a difference in the connection. They act differently when I don't have my phone with me, which is also very interesting. And you probably see the same with like any relationship that you're in, I guess. So leaving that phone behind and getting outside seems to be a huge difference. Yeah. So I got a question for you. So I have a real good friend. Actually, I'm doing a podcast with him later this week, and he hasn't had a drink in 5 years, but he owns a bar. So now you're a guy who, a professor of media, but you're professing this. Do you find that, do you have like a little bit of an internal struggle? Because I know he does with that. Yeah, I definitely do. And especially with, it's ironic that there's a section in my book about how our brain has changed because of all this screen time and media, and how we need like this ancient beneficial discomfort of boredom. And the fact that like my publisher goes, no, you need to be on Instagram to promote your book. Right. You need to promote your book on insert X media platform, right? There's definitely a struggle. And so I think that's why I realize that it's a balance, I'll try and get it all out in blocks some days, or every morning I have a block where I'm like, I'm only writing. Like I'm not touching my phone. I'm not checking email. I'm either hitting the keys or I am researching like dorky information that I'm going to insert into my writing. Like that's all I do. That's like 3 hours. So that gives me good time away to like have that period of where I'm just only working and my brain isn't like, oh, there's something shiny on Instagram, because that just like fractures your ability to produce good work. So I do that. And then at the same time, like, look, people like Instagram because it is fun. It is distracting. So I'm also not going to feel bad about myself if I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at bullshit for 20 minutes and I'm going to love it. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not going to like be like, oh, you moron afterwards. You know what I mean? So I think it's just trying to find a healthy balance and inserting those periods of more like time without any electronics, going for a walk every day for like 20 minutes, whatever it is, without anything. That's how I address it. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. I try to do the same, like with myself, but also with my kids. It's like, they're going to need to learn technology and to use technology. It's how do we, stop them from being, I don't want them to be those kids that are laying on the couch for 15 hours, either just looking at technology. Yeah. Right. And we're doing our best to not have them. I think like you talk about the boredom, I see it in them, like not scripting their day so much where it's like, what are we going to do right now? I don't know, but go do something. Like, there's no TVs, no anything. Like, I don't care what you do. And you'll see that, that's when they start to like play with their little characters and things that like, I'm starting to see disappear that I used to do when I feel like when I was still 8 years old, I was still playing with my He-Mans and like, setting up like G.I. Joe battles or whatever without scripting. So I agree. And the more I listen to your book, the more like all this stuff makes sense when you watch it in the little ones, like it's almost like a little test lab out there. It's very interesting to see. So what do you think is what's next on it for you, man? Do you have like any big adventures planned? And you just got back from one, or are you writing about this? Yeah, I'm going to so I got another book in the works. That was like the first trip for it. So that was a good one to start off. That was an adventurous one. So I'll be working on that. I'm going to keep doing some stuff for men's health and whatever else. So yeah, I'll be busy over the next year. It'll be good. That's exciting. That's exciting. So what's it been like? Like, now tell me like just more from like a fangirl type thing. Like, man, like being on like, I'm like, one we text here and there, you and I through Instagram. It's been interesting to watch. And I was like, oh, you wrote a book, exciting. And then I'm like, holy fuck, Joe Rogan and then Gabby Reese, all these huge name podcasts, the Tango One podcast. Like, yeah, dude, what's this been like? Like, is it kind of like a little bit surreal to be on all these things and also in demand with your time? Dude, it's been super awesome. Like, that's good to hear. Yeah. Like I've just met a lot of really cool people,
and gotten cool, like, I'll get like, I mean, the best is when you get some random person who's like, hey, I heard you on X podcast that I like. I read the book, and then insert a behavior they changed for some positive outcome. Like, I've had people be like, hey, like the hunger section of your book totally changed my frame of reference on how I eat. Like, I've been miserable because I've been on whatever diet and it hasn't worked. And like, this made me understand like gave me a greater understanding of diets in general and like my own behavior. And now I've applied this to not just eating, but X, Y, Z, and I've lost X amount of pounds. Or it could even be someone who's like, yeah, I had like a near-death experience. And this was yesterday. Someone emailed me. They're like, I had this near-death experience and I read your chapter about death. And it totally like reframed it for me. And now I've done X, Y, Z and their life is better. So, I mean, that's where it's really freaking cool. I mean, because you don't know, like you read a book, it's like writing a book is essentially being a hermit loner for like 3 years. And then you like release the thing into the world and just like, well, I hope you like it, guys. You know, it's like, it's crazy. And then to get outreach like that is super rad. So it's been super fun.
It must be pretty humbling, but also like, man, I mean, how many hours did this book take you, do you think? What do you think?
Oh, 3 years of work. 3 years of work every day. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of work.
So like, yeah, getting somebody to give you feedback, like, you know, to that extent too, like saving life feedback, like that's gotta be so rewarding.
Yeah, it's been super cool.
Like, talk about passion and purpose, man. I think you're on the right track. Happy.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Yeah. Thank you. You too.
Very, very happy for you. So if people want to get the book, what can they do? And you are here to promote the book at the end of the day, but to preface this is like, when I reached out to you, you're like 100%, I'd love to chat. And I think that's kind of more than this is about. You're not somebody who's actually just here to promote the book, but do your thing and promote the book.
Yeah. So the book is, it's available everywhere. Most people get it in audio, which Audible, I mean, whatever, just, you can find it, just Google it. And then, what else? I don't know. Eastermichael.com is my website. And yeah, I don't know. Super awesome to chat though, dude. It's been a minute. Me, you, and the big guy have to get together sometime soon.
Yeah, meet up for a workout. That'd be fun as hell. One of these rucks. You're bringing
Yeah.
That is one thing you're doing. You are bringing rucking back.
Yeah.
I've never so many people lately, and I don't know if it's just you or what, but you're the only one I see doing it. And like a bunch of my members were rucking this weekend, and they're sending me they want to buy those packs. You can't get them in Canada. The one that you've been yeah, you can't get them. So you gotta talk to these guys about that for me.
Dude, might have to open like a Canadian store for it.
Ship it here.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, man, it was awesome talking to you. I'm just going to click the end of the record, but really, really appreciate your time today. I know you have not much of it, and it was cool to link up.
Super fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now's the time to do more and be more.